how I use everything together and all that to heart. This is how I do it. You know what I mean? The thing about pedals is it's super personal. It's you're the one making the music. There's no rules. You can put the reverb in front for all I care. If you like the sound of the reverb in front of all your distortions, by all means, do it. That's just sort of my method to keep. I'm a big proponent of keeping things, while they're distorted, keeping it relatively clean sounding. So that's pretty much pedals themselves. Building the board, however, is a whole other ballgame. I feel like I'm going to talk forever. Just want to make sure I've covered everything on order. Tuner after distortion, delay after. There are some opinions on whether or not you should have tremolo before or after reverb. And there's the reason they sort of talk about that is if you have tremolo last in your circuit, it's going to be as pronounced as possible. It's going to be like literally taking every pedal and dipping the volume. In old Fender amps, like this BB right here, the way the amp worked, because it has reverb tremolo built into it, is tremolo is dead last. Because basically the way the circuit works is it's dipping the voltage to the power supply. Then reverb is before it. I'm not really a big fan of that, mainly because I don't necessarily want the tremolo to be as pronounced. So having it after the reverb basically makes the reverb sound like it's after the amp completely, like it's in the room, you know? So I like to have my reverb sounding like it's actually not necessarily made by an amp, but made by the world around you. Because you're in certain areas, you're going to have different reverbs. And that's the reason why I turn it off a lot of the times, because if you're playing a club or something and you hit a note, there's going to be reverb in the club, you know? So that's sort of my approach to that. The other sort of thing I want to talk about, and I went over noise gates, awesome. Building the pedal board is relatively simple. I use the pedal train stuff because it's really well organized. It comes with basically like a bag that you can carry, or a hard case, as I see. Is that yours, Brad?
Yeah, that's mine.
Awesome. You're so late.
It's okay. Still made it.
I like to use the pedal train stuff just because I can buy it and I'm super lazy. It comes with Velcro. All these pedals are all Velcroed down. A really large pet peeve of mine for buying pedals used is it's always the carpet side of the Velcro on the pedal board.
Here,
and
here,
the
here.
tangs, or whatever the hooks are on the pedal. The reason I do that is so you can vacuum the Velcro. If you were so inclined. But it's just that's the way you do it. You know how many used pedals I get?
That's the only true rule.
That's the only true rule of pedal. With the pedal train stuff, like I said, it's a good way to keep it sort of organized. Obviously, it's a product that you can buy rather than make. Another advantage to the pedal train stuff is it actually is designed to house the power supply that you can buy separately. And I'm going to go into the power supply in just a second, but basically the power supply can mount directly to it. It's so you can keep all your sort of pedals organized and all that. And it's just a good product. It's not super expensive. But however, going back to DIY and making your own shit, it's just a flat piece of thing. Like you can make anything out of it. Before I used to actually make my own pedal boards. Just get the plywood and then make maybe a tier, so you can have like the flat board, and then make yourself a tier so you can put the back pedals up a little bit so they're easier to hit. Which one of the big things with me is that I'm super clumsy. So having these pedals in the back are a danger zone. So actually the way I sort of lay out the pedals, and it's another thing I can talk about in a sec after I get past the pedal board thing. But once you have the board, I mean, you can make the pedal board. You can actually, a really good product to get is if you go to IKEA, you can get some 50-cent hot dogs. And they sell two products that you can get, which are basically like shelving units. It's called the Gorm, and what was it?
Broder.
The Broder. The Gorm is basically like a shelf that looks exactly like the pedal train stuff. Hilarious. It's a little bit crappy wood, but you can screw in a couple carefully nice screw holes in there, and you got yourself a makeshift pedal train. The Broder is a metal shelf that almost looks exactly like the pedal train stuff. It's a little bit, I believe it doesn't have as many slats, and it's like a graded sort of thing. But, I mean, get creative with that shit. I'm not going to tell you how to do that. In terms of laying out my pedals on my pedal board, I put all the most important ones on the front row, mainly because I was clumsy, or am clumsy, sorry. Basically, the way I sort of lay out my pedal board is basically all the ones that I either don't hit a lot, or they're easy to sort of hit, like the phaser here. I can sort of hit that, mainly because if I screw up and miss and hit this knob, there's only one knob, so I can usually use my foot to kind of... The dirty little secret I usually have on all the time, so I only really need to hit that once before a song or something like that. The tuner has a nice big knob, so I can usually hit that. And the reverb is usually on all the time, if I'm using it at all. And then these guys are the ones that I hit almost constantly, so these are in front. What else about pedal boards? Oh, I forgot to mention my another sort of pedal that I use, and I sort of ignored it, I guess because it doesn't have any markings on it. Is actually a pedal that I built, and I'm going to go over that in a second. But that's basically called a super hard-on, and it's basically a pedal made by the company Zvex, which are these guys. That is basically, it's sort of basically like a booster that's based off of old 60s consoles, like a recording console. And what's really cool about the SHO is basically it's got a ton of output, so it's really loud, and it adds like a sparkle to your sound. So it brings back some highs to your sound. So when I use the Explorer, that's a super dark sounding guitar, I'll usually kick on the SHO just to sort of bring back a little bit of high end. I know I said I didn't really use subtle stuff, but that sort of makes things work.
Well, that's subtle right in your face, though.
Yeah. But enough about my pedals. Anyway. The other sort of proponent to pedal boards is the power supplies for it. There's quite a few really good products out there for powering your pedal board. Generally, getting tons of the different wall warts isn't really a good idea. Like, you know how a lot of pedals come with the wall warts? You should really try to amalgamate them all into one power supply. Because usually wall warts that come with pedals, they actually supply quite a bit of current. And pedals, being the simple little devices that they are, don't really draw a lot of current. And we're talking milliamperage here, or amperage I should say, but it's sort of measured in milliamps on power supplies. Usually a power supply that you buy from Boss or something is like 500 milliamps, and a distortion pedal is gonna draw maybe 10 milliamps, something like that. So you can actually daisy chain a lot of pedals onto one power supply. I've sort of got that set up here. Basically, I have. Basically, this is sort of a power supply that you can buy. Basically, it's just like a little chain. See? So you can power 5 pedals on this, and then you basically plug it into your power supply. You got 5 outlets that you can basically power your pedals with. There's not a lot of limitations to this kind of system, and you can actually get like high milliamperage or high amperage adapters like this Godlike Powerall it's called, which can handle, I think it's 2,000 milliamps, 1.7 amps. So that's like 20 pedals. So that's a good way to power.
Yeah, I was running 12 pedals off of
Yeah.
mine.
So as long as you're sort of aware that eventually you're going to max out the amount of current that you're going to be able to pull from that, you can usually power basically everything on that board with one adapter. There is some issues you do run into, and it's sort of a little bit confusing to sort of figure out those issues. But one sort of issue that you're doing is that every pedal on here, because it's an electronic device, needs to get hooked to the ground somehow. When all these pedals are trying to go through one ground on your AC plug, you start to run into sort of noise issues where some pedals, when they're on the same electrical circuit, don't really like to be on that circuit, and they'll basically be noisy. A big, huge problem I've had is my favorite pedals, these guys, the Dr. Scientist stuff, because I don't know why they don't like to be, but they do not like to be on the same adapter as other Dr. Scientist pedals. So your solution to that is to get basically what's called an isolated power supply, which is this Voodoo Labs down here. The way that these guys do it is basically there's 8 different plugs in this guy, and it's 8 separate isolated outputs. And when you say it's an isolated outputs, they basically mean there's 8 of these, but 8 super high quality ones of these. So they're all electronically separated somehow. So basically any kind of ground issues that you run into running different kinds of pedals at once on the same adapter, you were limited because they're all on separate adapters. Now obviously I have more than 8 pedals on here, so some of them I do have chained together. And I actually use this nifty little, where are they? These. This is a company, I can't remember what the company's called, but I found them at the NAMM show in California. Basically, it's this kind of adapter, only they're modular. So basically you can only use one. Rather than having, like if you wanted to only power like 2 pedals with this, you'd have all this dangly left. So you get these guys, and these are basically modular pedals. So if you needed to connect another one, you just go whoop whoop to your next pedal. So I have a couple of these on here. Some more basically the way I've chosen it is I have some sort of more non-essential pedals running on a daisy chain. So you have this guy here. I mean the tuner, who cares about that? I don't need to have that on a separate isolated output. And then sort of I picked and choose the Timmy. You can share with, I think he's sharing with this one, and this guy's sharing with another fuzz. So what I do is any pedals that I won't necessarily have on at the same time, I'll run on the same outlet so that they're not on at the same time, on the same outlet. But I mean, that's just on powering them. Obviously the pedal power stuff, the Voodoo Lab stuff, is a little bit expensive. And I sort of was like, oh God, I'm such a nerd for spending this much money on a power supply. But it's actually eliminated a lot of issues with me, with my pedals and stuff like that. What's really cool as well is it actually has a courtesy outlet, so I can have a power bar on here. So if I need to plug anything else in, I can actually use the outlet on the back of that to sort of do that. So I like using those. They're really cool. Unfortunately, like I sort of mentioned that I was going to sort of supply a DIY sort of solution for you guys, but with power you don't really want to mess around. Don't mess with 120 in the wall. The Godlikes are really good. Just pick and choose what pedals that you run on the same outlet. Get a couple of them, and that's pretty much it. Once you've got it wired up and you got all your little patchy cables, you start to kind of get worried about basically maintaining the strength of your signal. When you start to run tons of pedals in line with each other, you're basically creating this long length of cable. I'm sure you guys have heard true bypass and stuff like that. That's basically a marketing term they use for effects pedals. And that was what I was talking about, basically the mechanical switch. When you physically press down on that switch and disengage it, there is a mechanical connection between the cable that's going into the pedal and the cable that's going out. So the pedal is not affecting the tone at all. There are some pedals that don't do that. Basically, I think I have a picture of it.